I think it's no secret that Project Motor Racing had an extremely rough start to life. The day one patch alongside its release entirely broke the game for many people. Now admittedly, a few days later a patch did get released to pretty much rectify a lot of those issues, but we're not here to talk about either the launch or the game actually improving. No, today we're here to do something entirely different. Now, one thing I like to do with any racing title is go as far as possible to try and break it. Whether that's the physics, the cars, the tracks, you name it, I just want the title to completely implode on itself and see what weird and random things we can actually find. And that's exactly what we're going to do today with PMR. So one of the first things I was ever made aware of about Project Motor Racing was the fact that some of the barriers in game can really be used to your advantage, in a sense giving you a speed boost by skipping certain portions of the track or certain corners, of course giving you a much bigger advantage than the 2-second time penalty you might receive. I did find, however, this is very track specific. Places like Daytona and Mount Panorama, it's incredibly easy to do this in certain sections of the track. However, others that feature a lot of grass, it's almost impossible. More than likely the car will just bounce off the barrier and then completely spin out. However, during my time finding these barrier runs, it did highlight a few things with the crash physics in PMR, in that really all you need to do is just hit the barrier at too much speed or maybe at a weird angle, and all of a sudden the game's crash physics just go completely haywire. So it was time to move on from riding the barriers to outright crashing into them to just see what we could do. So during this period it was all about just crashing different groups of cars into different types of barriers to just see what would happen. So during this crash testing I did notice certain classes of cars will react differently to the crashes. Now really LMP cars, Group C and GT1 will tend to hit a barrier and then all of a sudden start getting much more airborne. They just seem to take flight all the time. However, things such as hypercars, GT3s and GT4s tend to stay incredibly grounded and pretty much stuck to the floor. So then I started investigating more with the LMP cars, the Group Cs and of course the GT1s, because these are the ones I was getting the best results with. So with cars acting strange once they get airborne, this reminded me of Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, which does feature a grass verge, pretty much allowing any car to catch some air. So for reference, if you want to try this yourself, it's super simple to set up. So go ahead, get in a practice in any car you wish and head round the first left-hander. After this you're then going to be taking a right, and from there you're pretty much in the setup phase for this jump. So once you get to the straight you're going to begin picking up speed for this blind downhill left-hander. You want to take it as fast as possible, and on exit you want to go ahead and just veer off to the right. From there is a grass verge which allows your car to get airborne. What you're aiming for is the barrier opposite and to hit it as airborne as possible. It's really going to highlight some of the stranger crash physics in this game, but again it can be very dependent on the class of car you're in. So some of the more classic GTs tend to not have enough power to get majorly airborne and produce a weird result, and other cars are far too planted on the ground to properly take off and once again cause anything strange to happen. Hypercars, for example, are extremely difficult to get them to do anything here, as they tend to take off and pretty much instantly gravitate towards the ground, so they don't really work. So yes, whilst I tested the majority of classes in game, my best results once again were LMP, Group C and GT1, which tend to hit the barrier and then begin to get even more airborne. It's pretty crazy. So the first LMP car I tested would be the Cadillac Northstar. As we can see, we're actually going to hit this at a bit lower speed, and whilst the car does take off, it almost gets forced into the ground, hits the barrier and then all of a sudden gets rocketed right up into the sky. So it was a pretty awesome result, and whilst we did land out of bounds, it would then just get reset after going under the track for a bit. So during head-on crashes, the Audi LMP car was one of the best for just randomly getting airborne, and it's no different here. We hit the barrier backwards and all of a sudden the car just starts to take off and do its own thing. once again we're able to actually drop the car under the map, but it quite quickly gets reset. I then tried the Panos LMP1 car and it would actually give me my best result yet. Not in terms of getting airborne, I think it's because it's pretty front end heavy that it dipped down, hit the barrier and actually got forced out of the bounds. And well, at this point we can go ahead and explore everything under the track here. So what it seemed to be is that the majority of the time, if you hit a barrier with enough impact that you get airborne and end up under the actual track itself, you would tend to just get reset. But if you angle it that it throws you out of bounds, all of a sudden everywhere becomes drivable as long as you don't go back to the actual location that you took off from. I did find that Canadian Tire Motorsport is the single best place to go ahead and actually pull this off, and realistically it's the only place in game that I can think of getting properly out of bounds. So when trying to head as far away from the track as possible to see just how far we can get, I did notice a few things. Number one is that your car is pretty much limited, typically from anywhere from 15 to 40 miles per hour maximum, and there is a lot of kind of bumps and I guess jumps in the actual no terrain itself. So these do tend to have a few weird effects like spinning your car around for a while, so you're constantly having to reorientate yourself to just keep heading away from the track. But you can certainly go incredibly far before the game completely breaks. So after a good few minutes of driving as far away as possible from the track towards the JPEG in the sky, I did notice that weird things would begin to happen, things like my car going entirely invisible and black flashes on the screen. However, it wouldn't be long after this that I pretty much reached the limit of what I could do. The car just went entirely invisible no matter what camera angle I was in, and the black on screen would just pretty much stay there for extended periods of time. So unfortunately, I did get to pretty much the breaking point of this game. So unfortunately, we would never reach the JPEG in the sky. So next up, I tried it with the Mercedes Sauber, of course the Group C icon, and well, we would once again end up getting out of bounds in pretty extreme fashion this time around. We hit the barrier and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, but we do manage to end up under the track and out of bounds, so once again we are not reset. However, we did land with such force that the car would just consistently spin around without stopping, no matter whether we tried to stop it or not, so I just kind of had to wait this bit out. Eventually it would come to a stop and we can go ahead and now begin to explore under the actual track itself. So the first thing I did notice whilst actually under the track itself is that things will actually spawn in, but as soon as you're past it, it will then despawn before spawning in once again as you get further away. It was just really quite weird to pinpoint where we were on the track. So I eventually got my bearings and found the main start finish straight, including the pits, and well, this is where the next weird thing actually happened. It turns out the pits actually work when you're under the track. As we can see, we got the pit limiter enabled and disabled depending on if we drove on the pit line or the pit part of the track or not, so it was quite weird to see that working. So another thing I did notice, once we'd gone over the start finish straight, it did actually count me as going on to a timed lap. So at this point, track limits were beginning to work. So if I went to a portion of the track which say might have been the grass where it would have counted as a penalty, it would still count whilst under it. I also found at this point if I turned around and went in the opposite direction, I would begin to get a warning for going the wrong way now. So I wanted to see if it was possible to actually get out from being under the track itself, and it turns out it is. All you need to do is just head back around to the place that you actually did the accident and of course went out of bounds, and all of a sudden the game will just begin to reset you back on the track like nothing happened. So yeah, it was a rather quite nice discovery here looking under the actual track at Canadian Tire Motorsport. So is it possible to break PMR? Well, absolutely, and honestly some of the results here are hilarious. Have you found this out yet, or have you tried it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care guys, peace.